Welcome to the Financial Finesse Podcast, where we'll be discussing tips on how to handle your money and life with skill and style. Your host, Cathy Curtis, CFP, has been helping make finance accessible and intriguing for women for almost 20 years. You'll get savvy, actionable ideas listening to her conversations with some of the coolest and smartest women on the planet. And now, here's your host, Cathy Curtis.
Hi, I'm Cathy Curtis, host of today's podcast, the Financial Finesse Podcast. This is episode number 4. I'm also the founder of Curtis Financial Planning, an independent investment advisory firm based in Oakland, California. I am super excited about today's podcast because it is with 4 of my students from a personal finance class I taught last summer. The class was so much fun, and mainly it's because these women were so engaged in the material, and they just were incredible students, and I loved it so much that I can't wait to talk to them more about their experiences with money since the class and their life. And I know you're going to love their money stories. So before we get started, I want them each to introduce themselves. And we're going to start with Joy.
Hi, everybody. Like Cathy said, my name is Joy. It's a nickname. I'm Jocelyn Robinson. I am married, recently married, leap day of this year. I have 2 boys. One soon to be 15 and soon to be 11-year-olds. So we are definitely in teenage years. I currently work for a affordable housing developer in the accounting department as an assistant accountant. And I studied, I received my MBA from Mills in business economics and my MBA from Mills in 2019 and 2018.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Rebecca,
Thanks for
do you
having
want to say anything else?
Sure.
Okay,
Thanks,
here we
Cathy.
go. Sure.
Well, my name's Rebecca Castro, and I really appreciate you having us here today to talk about money. I am 29 years old, and I live with a partner in Oakland, California. I don't have any kids yet, but for work, I work at a company called NovoEd, and I'm a customer success manager. It's an ed tech company, and I help customers learn how to use our product. So it's a really fun job for me. And for all of my educational background, I studied environmental anthropology at Stanford University for my undergrad and moved on to Mills College, an MBA, and finished that last year, wrapping up with Cathy's course on personal finance.
Great. Thank you. Tori.
So my name is Tori, or if we're using government names, my name is LaTorree Howard, and I am 26. I am not married, but I'm in a relationship, and I don't have any children, but I'm the oldest of 6 kids, so I feel like I grew up raising children. So, yeah. And so, for work, I'm a legal interviewer with the Bar Association of San Francisco, and so mostly that just means listening to people's legal problems and trying to match them with a lawyer who's suitable for that problem. And then on the side, I'm a freelance digital artist. So
An awesome one, by the way.
Thank you. And I actually didn't go to Mills. I went to St. John's, which is in New York, but I love taking summer courses. This is actually the first summer in a while that I won't be able to just because of the shelter in place, but I always enjoy the classes there, and the personal finance class was like a godsend, so I'm excited.
Awesome. Reshonda?
Hi there. It's happy to be here, Cathy. Thank you for having me. Just a little bit about myself. She, her pronouns, Reshonda Williams. I originally hail from the Motor City, Detroit, Michigan, but have been in the Bay Area for several years now. And really similar to my classmates, I'm just a lifelong learner. I didn't attend Mills. I attended Grand Valley State University in Michigan, but truly believe in continuing my education beyond my undergraduate, and taking the personal finance course at Mills was just a really amazing step for me. I work with the Oakland Promise under the Brilliant Baby program as the coordinator, and we're committed to ensuring that children in Oakland from birth on through their educational career can graduate high school and attend college or pursue a career of their choice. And part of that is financial capabilities for our parents. So I had been working in that field, but it really wasn't until this Mills personal finance class that I found a way to incorporate that into my own life.
Excellent. So speaking of this personal finance class, but prior to taking this class, do you feel like you had an education in strictly personal finances, your own finances, how to handle money, how to open accounts, et cetera, et cetera? Does anybody want to jump in? And
I definitely had personal finance education. Just I didn't mention that I'm 43 going on 44 at the end of the year. So this is my second marriage. Of course, I have children. I was a stay-at-home mom until I started at back to school in 2014. So I wasn't the breadwinner. I was the one that took care of the household along with my children. So I had to balance our checkbook. I wrote checks out for our bills. I went and did the grocery shopping and things like that. So around personal finance, I knew what was in our joint accounts, and I knew what was in, our immediate savings. But I didn't understand credit, and I didn't have any investments. My ex-wife had like a 401k and some others investment plans through her working, but I wasn't a part of that because I wasn't working. But as her spouse, I signed up in her pension plan, and then we have our children. We got them education plans, so when folks wanted to give money for their birthdays, they could go into their scholarship funds or whatever. So that was the broadness of my understanding until the personal finance class, when I was shocked just understanding IRAs, Roth accounts, the difference when you can pull money out, when you can, which is the better place to put money in. Like that was mind blowing in your class, Cathy, and I really appreciate that because I wasn't working. I was out of the workforce for over 10 years. And so the only money bank that I have is part of my ex's pension plan through our divorce. And I had no clue. I really don't know like when I can start getting that money, how much money it was. And so taking your class, that was like one of my detective modes I went into, and I was like, well, I'm gonna find out how much money I got coming to me, and I'm gonna know where it's at, and I want to know the percentage points, and I want to know who's holding it. And it was just like, I had all these questions, and as I was talking to the financial advisor, I was hitting him with them. Bad. What about this one? What about this one? He was like, "Are you an investment? Do you work? What do you do?" And I was like, "You can thank Cathy for all of this knowledge. Thank you."
See, that's the power of knowledge. It's not just knowing what a Roth or an IRA is, but in real life, when you learn these terms, you can really help yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that's a
Totally.
great example. Rebecca, do you have any?
Absolutely. I actually took one course in undergrad on finance. But I think for me, at least, a lot of and I absolutely loved the entire experience, but it was highly theoretical. Whereas our class was very practical and hands-on, and we did reports and went through things together, really analyzed in depth, like what our retirement accounts were doing. I had no idea that my retirement account wasn't doing anything.
Did you have it in cash? Good. Is that right?
No, the biggest thing I learned from the course, and this is something that we talked about at the time, was that my IRA was basically in cash. I had put money in, but I hadn't taken the second step to actually invest it.
Right.
It was life-changing for me. Grown tremendously since then, just from that simple act. And I thought I was doing enough of I was like, I'm investing, I'm putting money into my retirement account, but I was putting it in and then not taking this because I just didn't know I had to take another step.
Yeah. Which is amazing to me that people don't know. You don't learn these things anywhere unless you take a class. This is, you consciously decide you want to learn about it. Okay, Tori, any stories?
So as I mentioned, I am the oldest of 6 kids. That means I always grew up in a big family, and financially that is like means that like money is hard. But at the same time, like my parents, they obviously, things like you need to save money for a rainy day, but like one of the things that you really stress the importance of is like making sure you have like 3 to 6 months of savings specifically, like so a number, not just like saving indefinitely, but like, like saving a specific amount so that if something happens. And I immediately thought about your class when the COVID, when the shelter in place started and people were losing their jobs, because I was like, man, for people who don't have that savings, and if they lost their job, this is a hard time right now. This would be like the prime time to have had that 3 to 6 months of savings, because
Right. Or else you have to rely on credit cards.
On credit cards, on hoping the government gets the money to you in time, on like all these other things. And it's just,
Right.
which one of the things that I'm learning in my job is that it is taking a long time for people to get those unemployment checks. So I immediately thought about you and that class when the shelter in place started. But outside of that, I learned so much in your class. Like one of the biggest takeaways for me personally was about my credit cards. Because while I've always been good about like paying them, paying the minimum or more if I can, I never thought to check what my percent rate, like my interest rate is. And that was a huge game changer, because one of my credit cards is like dang near a scam, is what I realized, because the interest rate was 31%. And it was a non-negotiable 31%.
That's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
So as soon as I realized that, first of all, as soon as I realized I could check that, and then I checked it, and then I realized what it was, I was like, I need to get a different card. So yeah, and I've had this credit card for 8 years now. So 8 years of me paying this 31% interest. And fortunately, I've never missed a payment, and I've always been really good. But at the same time, I would have paid that card off so much faster.
I did carry that. Okay.
And it's because, which is like an unfortunate thing, but my car that I had at the time was just like, it was a lemon basically. And so it was just like expense after expense after expense.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I had a card that had the balance to carry it, but at the same time, that was the card that had the most extreme interest rate. So it was just taking so long to pay it off. Even though it happened so long ago, I was like still paying it off.
Oh,
and
yeah,
so,
with 31%, it's almost like you're never going to pay that thing off.
Yeah. So
yeah. So what did you do? What did you do? Did you close the card? Did you transfer?
I didn't close it. I didn't close it because that is still my credit history. It's 8 years of on-time payments, which you taught me. Because otherwise I would have definitely been like, forget this card.
Yeah, right.
But no, so I left it open, but I transferred the balance out to a card that had a lower interest rate and it had cash back. So, and I set the cash back for online purchases because I found out that was also editable, and I'm always buying stuff online. So I've been getting so much cash back. So happy. And I've been applying that directly towards paying down the balance.
Perfect.
So my credit score has gone up a lot. So I really
because of all of that, right?
Because of all of that. Like a simple change, just changing the card that I was using.
Thanks. Reshonda?
Yes, I really identify with what Rebecca said around having taken courses in undergrad on the topic of finance. And it was very theoretical, or my major was public and nonprofit administration. So it was about nonprofit budgeting and finance. And I didn't really find ways to be able to connect that back to myself. And it was really similar in growing up. My parents had made the money mistakes and they wanted better for me, but it was kind of going over my head. They were like, I've opened up a credit card for you at 18, which I'm so appreciative of now. It's my highest credit card at 6 years. And just really able to see how that's been able to grow and help my credit. But again, all of these concepts, I kind of knew of them. But to Jocelyn's point, I didn't have the education to be able to apply them to myself. And there's been so many little lessons that have just really been beneficial since your course. The biggest thing I think I'll say is that I opened up a Roth IRA. So I'm starting a full-time position in August with a excuse me, a 401k, but I've been working for several years and hadn't been putting anything aside for retirement until I took your class. And I'm just building that habit, having a monthly amount that goes out, and just really excited that I've been able to do that and keep it up.
Yeah.
In addition to, I've opened up an online high yield interest earning savings account. And this is where I'm doing that 3 to 6 months of saving. When I found out that I could get 2.4% on my savings account, and without it being risky, I was super excited to be able to do that.
You're not getting that anymore though, are you?
No, not anymore, but it was flexible. But at the start, it was really exciting to see.
Yeah, no, I remember that. How long ago was that? 2 years ago you were able to get that, or 3? Because it's gone way down.
I was right when I took your class. I opened it up, and I was still able to get that 2.4%, which was really nice. So that's where I've been able to be putting my money. And I love that there's no brick and mortar, because that means I don't go to the ATM to take money out.
That's right. That's what's great about online bank accounts. It's not as easy to get the money, for sure. You know, I love it that you've all opened Ross, we talked about Ross a lot in the class, because I think they're the best account for younger people, because if you really do need the money at some point, there's less penalties and you could always take out what you put in. So like if you're going to plan to buy a house, and a lot of you have house buying on your minds and things like that. So super smart. Great. Well, thank you. Those are great things that you learned. Okay, so speaking of lessons, all of you have faced some kind of hardships as you've been on your journey to get independent, right? I'd love you to share a story about something that you overcame, whether you had credit card debt, or you tried to get a job, you couldn't get it, just something that you really learned a lesson from, like kind of like me. I felt deprived, and so I took things into my own hands, and I tried to find ways to always earn money as I was growing up. And Rebecca, do you want to start?
Sure. I think that I was very fortunate that I earned scholarships and qualified for aid for my undergrad. So I didn't come out with a ton of debt after my undergrad, but I knew that I wanted to go to grad school and that I wasn't going to qualify for a lot of aid for grad school. So I planned to work for about 5 years to save up that money. And I think one of the biggest mistakes I made was just paying out of pocket straight up, instead of investing that money, taking out a loan, paying it down gradually, and like building credit. Instead, I just spent all of my savings on grad school.
Oh.
So it wasn't until the summer course, after I walked in graduation and I needed that one extra course to graduate, that I learned from you why mistake for me. And I kind of knew the whole time. I was like, oh, this doesn't feel good. I'm just like, losing all of this money, but felt like I was investing in my education. But I'd say that was one of the biggest financial hurdles or lessons. Knowing that I'd spent.
Talking about leveraging yourself, like paying for some of it, taking out debt for some, right?
Exactly. So taking out debt for some, investing some, and just more strategically managing taxes, making some money earn back for me while continuing to work and go to school. And instead of just, putting all of it from savings directly into school.
Yeah. But you don't have any debt right now, so that's a good thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Reshonda.
Yes. So one of my biggest money lessons. So earlier on, I shared I'd always been this saver. So during my college undergrad experience, I knew that I wanted to study abroad. I was a first generation college student, really just setting a pathway, and I figured I wanted to get the full experience. So the career. So between getting the finances and finding a location, it took, let's say I walked across the stage and had one final credit I took abroad. But that was my goal, right? I wanted to study abroad. And when I went abroad, I also had plans. I'm single for tax filing purposes, but I do have a long-term relationship that I'm in, and we had plans to move to California. So while I was studying abroad, finishing up my final courses, I was also looking for a job. And that's when I found my current job at Oakland Promise. And what I'll say about that is once I got back into the country, I had about 4 days to pack up my apartment, get everything set, move across the country, and then start my job. So I was really thankful. I saved up this money for my study abroad, and I had a little bit left over because I was very cautious while I was abroad in Cyprus, Greece. Really great experience. And I think to your point, Jocelyn, I love that. If you pretend you don't have it, you don't have to spend it frivolously. So that's really that kind of take I'm allowing myself to take on this new look. Like if I don't.
Let me ask you about credit card debt. How do you do credit now? Do you charge and pay off every month, or do you carry balances?
So I do not carry balances. I learned that from you, but I do charge, like, here's my $20 car wash. Okay, I'm gonna go pay it, and try to be very particular, because that is the thing. I do want to make sure that those credit cards stay open and I continue to have that line of history. Right. So I've just been really strategic with my credit, which
that's really good.
Yeah, and it's just helped me also just from month to month, right? I'm able to be just a better spender. As I'm looking to actually get my promotion as a coordinator of my current job, I'm excited to be able to take the little extra that I'll be earning and pretend I don't have it, right?
That's so smart. I mean, that is such a trap people fall into. Everyone spends up to what they earn, you know? I mean, maybe they're saving too, like auto savings, but you get a raise. And if you have goals for the future, it's better to save it. You won't miss it. You weren't spending it before, right? Yeah, that's
exactly. And I remember my mom telling me that growing up, and she's like, oh, only live off, 70% or whatever it is, or trying to have a formula. And in my mind, it never made sense. I'm like, I made money. I kind of like you, Cathy. I made the money. I want something. I should be able to have it. Yeah. But then just understanding, making my money work for me, having these long-term goals. And so I'm excited to take on that challenge of not raising my lifestyle and continuing to just save and be diligent. And honestly, I'm really happy to hear that a few of you have college savings accounts for either siblings or your children, because that's another thing. I'm the first in my family to graduate from college, to begin my career, move across the country. And I have great nephews and cousins, all under 10, that I want to be able to be an example for and encourage them to have a college savings account. I myself grew up with one and know the power of it.
Yeah. Congrats on being the first in your family. That must have been a big deal.
Thank you. Yes, it was a very big deal. And, that's why I work with the organization I work with now, to be able to support children to have an education. Research shows that pursuing an education, your higher education, is really an equity indicator, as well as allowing our students, especially our Black, Indigenous students of color, to be able to gain social capital and excel and close that racial wealth gap.
I love it. So important. Okay, Tori.
So like I said, I've kind of been saving my whole life, but saving money and knowing how to properly spend money are two different things. And so that's something that I would say I was pretty good about until I was really independent, which is to say when I went off to college, because I went away to college. So I'm originally from here, Oakland, in the Bay Area, but I went to college to New York. Obviously my family is not in New York, so my parents were not able to be they weren't able to support me. Also, like I said, I have 5 other siblings, so they financially really couldn't support me either. So all I had to go off of was whatever was left over after school was paid for, whatever was left over, usually from loans. And so that's just kind of what I had to live off of. However, one of the things that I didn't fully process once I got to college was the concept of bills and debts, and and how somehow magically no matter how much savings you have, the bills seem to increase with your savings. I feel that tends to happen. If I ever get a bonus at work, there's a new bill that pops up. They're like, oh, look at this, your bill changed. And so that real world aspect, or the real world application of what are you saving your money for, was really important, because sometimes I would save up a bit of money and I'd be like, oh, I just have all this money, so now I can buy something that I want, not really thinking about the fact that like there's things that I need. So and so that's something that I really had to work through. And at one point I want to say like midway through my sophomore year in college, I had $6 in my bank account, and it had to last me 2 months. So I bought a huge bag of rice because rice is cheap. And I, whenever my friends would go out to eat, I would be like, can I have your leftovers? I had to throw away all my pride. I was like, I don't know. But anyway, so that was one of those hardships for me, because it made me really stress the importance of like, what am I saving my money for? Which is when I came and when I got to your class and you told us about like saving 3 to 6 months of your expenses, of the things that you have to buy, your must buys, and also being mindful of like how much do you have coming in versus how much do you have to have going out. It's something that I wasn't really paying attention to before. I just was like, oh, I might think that I'm, like doing well, because in college I might have like $2,000 in my bank account. But if my bills for rent and stuff like that are more than that, then I'm actually like coming out with a deficit. I just happen to be getting money fast enough that I didn't notice it right away. And so that's something that really hit home for me when I was on my own.
Do you have credit card debt now? Do you carry balances, or do you pay everything off?
So like I mentioned before, because of that one card that I had, which I fortunately don't have anymore, but I do have some balances that are still carrying over, but it's significantly less than what it was before. And now whenever I use my credit cards, it's only for something that I know that I could pay off. So for example, I recently bought a washing machine for my house, but I had the money already set aside in my bank account for it, and I had been saving for it. So I put it on the card just so that I can, build that credit. And then like within the next month, I paid it off.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with credit at all.
Yeah.
It's when it gets out of control that it's the issue.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Are you strategically paying down your credit cards?
Yes.
Because interest rates are still what are they now? 14?
The one of them I think is 18, but that's also, it gives me cash back, so it doesn't hurt as much, because when you balance it out, the percentage that I get on cash back versus the amount that I'm paying in interest, I guess it comes down to like $13, or 13% rather. Yeah. And so what I do though is that I am, like I said, I'm only putting something on my card if I know that I can pay it off in cash. And then also when I do pay that off, so for example with the washing machine, then I'm paying off extra on top of that, because I'm also still trying to buy down my total balance. And so anytime I get extra money, besides what I need to put into my savings, I put it onto my credit cards. That's like the majority of where my excess money goes right now. It's just like I am aggressively paying down my credit cards now that it's on a lower, more manageable like payment each month. So for example, my credit cards before, my monthly payment was actually like $300 a month, and right now it's like $50 a month. Okay. So I can still pay that $300 a month, which I usually still do, but it's actually doing more for me, because I'm not just paying a minimum balance. I'm paying the minimum plus a huge lump sum more. So
because this thing with the interest rates on credit cards is so egregious, this 18% and whatnot. I mean, if you can earn 7 to 10% on your investments, you're doing well. So think about that. The credit and inflation is so low that it's really smart to pay down those high interests. It's just so much in your financial favor to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're doing it. I mean, you can't just focus on paying down debt. You've got all these other things you need to do, but it's still so important to the overall financial picture.
Yeah. So that's what I'm working on.
Great. Yeah. Joy?
So having kids are expensive. But what I went through was my divorce. Being a stay-at-home mom, I wasn't prepared at all. Everything was in my ex's name, the house, the cars. We had a joint account, but she had a separate account. And I went through it for a good 2 years where I was not prepared. When I moved to Oakland from Cincinnati, I only had a high school education. And I had been out of the workforce for over 10 years, like I said. So I didn't have a savings. We split what was in our joint account down the middle, but she had income coming in, and I just had what I walked away with, which was like
You stayed at
$3,500.
home, right? You were mom, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was like $3,500. I needed to find a place to live. I need to furnish to that place. I need to get food. And then I was in a battle, a divorce and custody war for 2 years. And I came out on the better end of that, but it was 2 year struggle. And so it was a drastic change for my family. I had to go work part-time. So I was away from when she had the boys, I would work. And when I had the boys, I wasn't working. And so being primary parent, I have them 4 days out of the week. So I was only able to work 3 days. And I fell back on, a little bit of bookkeeping information that I had, and wind up getting a really good job through a temp agency at a family-owned business that was like, oh, bring your kids in, yeah, you can. And so I was able to move from 3 days a week to, 5 days a week, and really get a nice, be able to work. Unfortunately, that went away, and so I was just basically living off of my child support payments. And I moved us into a 1-bedroom, and we shared that 1-bedroom, and I was super frugal, and I went on welfare, just like I was repeating the same things that my mom did, but I didn't have that down and out feeling. It was like, this is what I need to do.
It's going to lead to my next question. And from your answers, I don't know whether this has been for all of you in your lives, about race and how you've been affected by that financially, job opportunities, and all that. Now, I know it's a big question, but it's really so relevant to ask you that, especially now. And I hope you don't mind sharing. If you do, just don't. But who would like to step in? And Tori.
So I believe I shared this story when we were in our class, but as far as like myself as a Black woman, especially as it pertains to finances, the two major situations where I guess where I was negatively impacted, and in both cases I didn't realize it at the time, like how much someone had taken advantage of me, of the fact that like they knew that I most likely wouldn't know about these lower opportunities or these better opportunities, and the fact that they even offered them. So so one obviously being my credit card, like I said, had a 31% interest rate. It was non-negotiable. It was something that they offered me, and it's something that I saw that they offered my sister more recently, but it's something that they specifically offer only in lower income communities. They're like, oh, you don't have credit? Use this credit card. You can build your credit. It's great. But the reality is it's highly predatory lending. And like you said, it's like nearly impossible to pay off.
That's crazy.
And I didn't even realize. I didn't know to check my interest rate. I just knew that I had a credit card. I knew that I had a card. I had to make sure that I paid the minimum balance because I didn't want to default or anything like that. But the second one, which hit me harder, especially more recently, is my car. When I got my car, that lemon that kept breaking down and I had to replace eventually. But they gave me an interest rate that was like so incredibly high for this car. And it was something like, again, I think it was like 22%, so these astronomically high interest rates, which I don't know anything about because I've never purchased a car before. And my parents, to the best of their knowledge, they're haggling, thinking that they're helping, which they did because it could have been worse. But again, they only know from experience from what they've been offered, right?
So they actually haggled down to 22%? What
yes.
was it? Oh my gosh.
It was like 27 or 28 at first. And the person was like, oh, we can't go any lower, And again, that's a lie. But all these things, but because my parents would have never been offered a better interest rate. So how would they know, So, and when I took your class and everyone was talking about, oh, my car is 7%, 6%, 4%, I was like, oh. And so when I got my car that I currently have, I bought it new and I had to argue. And I went there for 2 days and I was there for 2 full working days while I was working with the Oakland Promise, which meant that I wasn't making money because I was physically at the auto dealership negotiating with them about what I should be paying. And they brought it down to 6%, It probably could have been less, but you know, they were like, it could have been worse. So,
At least
and then
reasonable.
yeah, it's compared to 20-something%, it was much more reasonable. And my payments, I will eat them gladly. I'm like, it's fine. It's a brand new car. It's not going to break down on me anytime soon. And if it does, it has a warranty. So that was the trade-off for me.
Negotiate down to? What did they start at?
Well, first they tried to tell me I wasn't approved. So first they tried to tell me I could not get a car. They said that my credit was not good enough. And I had literally checked it that morning. And I was like, that's a lie. And then they tried to show me the screen. They're like, see, look, here's the list of people that have rejected you. And I'm like, but there's a list right over there. Who's the list of people that accepted me? So then they assumed I couldn't read. And, you know, it was just a process. So like I said, I was there for 2 full days. So I was there for 16 hours back to back.
That is the worst experience, being in those places negotiating.
Yeah.
Worst.
So
for everybody, but oh my gosh.
So it was so frustrating. But I got my car. I've had my car for about 2.5 years now, and it's great. I've never had any problems with it. Fast forward to maybe like 3 months ago, my boyfriend, who is a white man, he went to go get a car. They were like, hey, did you know we had this discount today? Did you know that you can actually get this low interest rate? Hey, how old are you? Has your grandfather ever, do you know anybody who's ever owned a car? And they're like, oh, well, if your grandfather owned this car back in 19 whatever, then he can also get a discount. So they were just offering him discounts that was not mentioned anywhere that these things existed. Right. And so his interest rate is 2.5%. Right. And they offered, he walked in and he said, I'm not going to pay more than this much per month for a brand new car. And they're like, okay, sir, we can do that. And it's a completely different experience. So privilege or something.
That is just so unfair. It really is.
Wow. So that's my experience with racing credit.
Well, you're learning though. I bet the next time you won't even accept 6%.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Because next time I'm going to have excellent credit and I'm going to be like, oh no.
Yeah, right. Right. Reshonda, you had your hand up?
Yes, I have this really early childhood memory that I wanted to share as well. So I am a Black biracial woman. My mother is white and my father is Black. And growing up, we always would have different used cars. We did a lot of driving, so we needed a decent, nice car. And I remember going to the dealership, and my parents had different roles that they would play. So my dad would always go in first. He would always ask for the car that we wanted. He would get a price estimate, and he'd say, all right, I'll be back later this afternoon. And later this afternoon was when my mom would come. And just hearing your story, Tori, again, is just so familiar to this. My mom would go in and get a much better deal than my father. And then my father would come in, and it was almost like they knew they were wrong. So they would give them an even better deal once they realized that my mother and father were together. So they figured out how to play the system, if you will. And, you know, it's sad, but there's so many instances in my life where I remember my parents literally going in to see, well, how will they treat me? You know, my father, the Black man, versus my mother, the white woman. And the difference was night and day. The other thing I'll say to that is just really lack of access to knowledge. It wasn't until I got into college and actually joined my co-ed business fraternity, Alpha Kappa Psi, the Psi Xi chapter, that I even started to think about these concepts with myself. So it's when I first discovered the Acorns app. And then thanks to you, Cathy, for explaining what I was even signed up for. I just knew I was supposed to do it because it was recommended to me. But these concepts of money are very much so a mystery and also taboo, especially in a lot of people of color's culture. And so we don't talk about them, or it's kind of seen as something you stray away from. Yeah, and it's just been really grateful, again, to be able to be in a space where you can have these conversations and also be able to have these conversations with the lens of race and how they play into that. Because the more you know, truly the more empowered you are to be able to have those conversations. And, you know, to Tori's point, it probably wasn't even initially thinking like this could potentially be a race thing. But on the other hand, I have the experience where I've always seen that it was a race thing. So I always have that in the back of my mind when I'm operating and being mindful of what is the situation and what am I actually worth?
Right. Really good. Really good. Rebecca.
Yeah. Reshonda, you made some really too. And when I think about how race and wealth have intersected, for me, it's really about the concept of generational wealth. And I have an indigenous background. I'm a Native American from California, and our land is Yosemite National Park. And we've been in over a court battle for federal recognition, and we have not been granted that permission yet. The court punts it out kind of every year. And this past year, we had to prove that we were, even though we were all dispersed around the park, not allowed to live in the park. And all of our tribe's resources and money and work has gone into these battles. And it started from, the 1849 gold rush. First, there were massacres, and natives were hunted legally and not granted religious freedom until 78. So there's
Wait, what
this
year? 1878?
19.
19. Wow. Okay.
So starting from the mid 1800s, kind of my community has not been building on wealth, and didn't really even building on the kind of wealth that exists and is what gets you ahead in today's society. So there's an entire conflict in my background of thinking about money that I've been balancing, of trying to live in today's world and build wealth where there's no kind of historic intergenerational wealth or value put on that in my community. So it's this very interesting contrast that is where my race and money intersect and contradict each other, and don't connect as well, that I've had to educate myself constantly on how to live in today's world, how to bring that knowledge back into my community so that we can maintain our traditional values, our vision, our connection with our history, being able to be members of society, and fighting for ourselves to be people in the eyes of the government. It's this very interesting relationship where we're just recognized as people, while also trying to prove ourselves and build ourselves up and just live in our ancestral homeland.
How do you help your community learn more about building wealth and things like that?
I would say through role model. I've given talks before at UC Merced with my aunt, or she's my cousin. I don't exactly know how we're related, but I call her my aunt, and she's a cousin somehow. But I try and help out where I can. It's more one-on-one and personal communication. Our tribe's not that big, but
are you unusual in your tribe, your education and ambition and all that?
I would say yes. So from my family, my siblings and I, with a couple of my cousins, have gone outside for four-year college degrees or higher education as well. And it's not super typical of my tribe in general.
Yeah. How does your tribe support themselves?
Everyone supports themselves individually, and the board, my understanding is that it's more of a volunteer basis.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's so interesting. That's just a whole different world that most of us don't learn about. Did you ever feel like you lacked opportunity being who you are?
I would say I didn't really felt like I lacked opportunity so much as I just had to work harder. Everything was about working hard, and work ethic was the number one value. Family first, and you work for what you have. And you always, feed your friends and your family and whoever needs it. Food's a big part of it. So I think that I didn't necessarily lack for opportunities, but I think that whenever I earned them through extremely hard work, I was criticized for them. When I got into Stanford, people would tell me like, oh, it's because you check the box, because you're Native. I heard that from so many people, and I had so much imposter syndrome. And it took me a long time to realize, like, no, I worked extremely hard for this. A lot of people work really hard and are rejected from great colleges. And it's kind of a nature of the system, and it's not great. But it took me a long time to recognize my value and my worth, in that my hard work got me to where I am.
How do you float that little clap thing that someone's doing? I love that. Let's float that. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
So
Laps all around.
yeah, if I recall, you were going to buy a house, right?
That's my financial plan. I bought a car instead. So I was really, listening to what Tori was saying. I started planning after we talked last summer. We met a couple times but I kind of changed my plan around a little bit and decided house was going to be more longer term planning, and that I wanted to invest in a car. And I started planning about 6.5 months ago for exactly what kind of, and I waited until they offered 0% financing, and then I went in and got it. Yeah, sorry, Tori.
Knowledge. It's all about knowledge, right? What kind of car did you get at 0%?
A Toyota RAV4 hybrid, and I am just through the roof excited. It's my first new car. It's driving a little stick shift, like 1990 Ford Escort before, that didn't have air conditioning. It was crank windows. So I was thrilled.
That's so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm sure you're going to make the house thing too.
Yes, it's in the plan.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Joy.
Yeah, race has always played a big impact in my life. I think the first time it was financial was the first time I opened up an account by myself in Cincinnati. And it wasn't a credit card, it was just a normal checking account, and I had to jump through hoops. Normal depositing of money should have been enough, but I needed to bring in they wanted a letter from my employer that said I actually worked there, that this was my check, this and that and the other. And I was like, you know what? I don't have to do all this. And it was a national bank. It wasn't like a local bank. And I was just like,
you weren't
yeah.
trying to take money out, you were trying to put it in.
Yeah, I was just trying to get a regular checking account with checks, and I had never overdrawn a checking account. I had never been denied a checking account before, and I had to jump through a lot of hoops. When I bought my first car, I was very I didn't have any knowledge whatsoever. I just needed a car, and my mom took me. My sister worked at Ford, which is a big plant in Cincinnati, and she had a family plan, and you get a huge discount and a bunch of stuff. And I went to the Ford dealership, and was looking at all these cars, and it was just myself. I was like 21, 22. Just wanted a small car that I wasn't going to have to put a whole lot of money in. And they were showing me these big old expensive cars for like no reason. And the interest rates were ridiculous now, but hindsight, right? And I did finally get a car, and it was like, it pulled up on the truck, and it was this money green car. And I was like, I want that one. And I got it. But looking back on it, it was a $17,000 car, and I paid double for that because I wasn't knowledgeable.
Well, I mean, we're going to stay on this topic. We're going to do one last question because we're long. This has been so great. I want to have more of these. So the Black Lives Matter movement is getting a lot of support right now. I hope it keeps going. I think it would be getting even more support if it wasn't for COVID, because I think more people would be out protesting, because some people are afraid to be out, but they're still getting big crowds, lots of support. So do you all think that this movement is going to have any impact on people of color financially at all? Or what impact do you think it's going to have? Who would like to? Yeah, Tori.
So one, I had a thought. The first thing was that in some ways, I think the ability for the Black Lives Matter movement to to kind of balloon the way that it has in the last couple of months is in part because we've been in COVID, because a lot of people are not working. I know that myself especially, and historically a lot of people in the Black community, one of the biggest points of fear when you're thinking about going out and protesting is, what if I lose my job? But in this case, you've removed that obstacle because I've already lost my job. So what are they going to do now? They can't fire me. So so I think 'cause I would say that in a lot of ways, its ability to amplify has been because people are spending more time on their computers, so they're able to message things to each other faster. You've been seeing people getting fired, which is something I have never seen before. Like, people are getting fired like that for saying the wrong thing to the wrong person, and they caught it on recording, which sometimes happens anyway. But now everyone has seen it. Someone did their research. They've investigated. I know where this person lives now. I'm gonna message their job directly. They've been doing petitions to get people fired at certain places. I forgot what it was, but my boyfriend told me that a company CEO fired his own daughter because she said something racist, which is a level of commitment. He probably only did it just because of the public saw it. But what that says to other employees is that if my daughter is not safe, you are not safe. So you need to keep that racism in check. So I would say that
positive.
Yeah. So I would say that one of the things I feel like has been coming out of this is a little bit more accountability. At the same time, there are people who even still, I think, see it as kind of more just a trending thing, and so especially when it comes to getting justice for people who were wrongfully killed, pretty much whoever gets justice is the person who is the most popular at this time. So I think one of the two people who you hear a lot about right now are George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, but Breonna Taylor, her killers are still out there, and because she has now been bumped down in the headlines, there's less accountability, there's less pressure on that local police department to actually grab people and put them through the legal channels. So
do you think that's going to die out, or do you think anything's going to happen there?
Well, it's hard to say, but I would like to be optimistic.
Yeah.
I lean towards optimism. Because realistically, I don't see COVID, the shelter in place ending anytime soon. So I'm hoping that helps to continue people to have this momentum, because as soon as people go back to work, that is already that's less time that they have available. That's, again, that level of concern about, what if I lose my job because I'm doing this?
Yeah,
because there are employers who will fire people. So I'm hoping that more, not just conversations about change, but actual change will come out of this. So right now we're in that conversation stage, and I'm hoping that if we have this window of time where where there are fewer people who are dealing with these extra constraints, I hope that that'll help to really push forward the change that it's on paper and in practice. And so I'm an optimist. I'm optimistic that there's few possibilities that we can go somewhere with this.
I love optimism. Joy.
I unfortunately think it's going to die down. And that is because I've been through the Rodney King incidents. I've been through a lot of different incidences of, racial inequalities, protests, and things like that. I think for George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, the fact that it was on video and that people are sitting at home and have nothing else to do and had to watch these videos over and over, and watching George Floyd call out for his mother really pulled at the heartstrings of America. It's almost, I correlated to what happened on Bloody Sunday during the marches for voting, when the news showed what happened on that bridge in Selma, Alabama. White people were like, oh my dear Lord. And it was like, what are we doing as a country? Because it wasn't hitting them in their face right away. You would look at news stories, or you would, hear stories, but until you see it for yourself, it doesn't have the same context. And so watching George Floyd die on camera, watching Ahmaud Arbery getting chased down and shot on camera. And I think Breonna, the difference is we don't have that video yet. But once those cameras are released she's going to be right back up there. And every time there's a police shooting, unfortunately, it has to be in that context. Then you have Black Lives Matter, but our lives are systematically oppressed every day, every day. And it's not just a fear of police, it's fear of financial institutions, it's fears of education systems. We have huge fears, but this is just the one that is focused on right now. And, you know, this is 150, 200 years after slavery that we're still fighting to be not second-class citizens, not treated as, you know, 3/5 of a man. You know, we still don't have every right that we are supposed to have as natural-born citizens who were brought over here on slave ships, not distressed. You know, I am a fourth-generation descendant of a slave, just four in my 40 years, and I don't have the same footing that my white counterparts have. I never have. Even when my mom made sure that I was in the best schools in public school, even though, you know, she moved us out of the projects, that's where my life started, was the projects. So I am always cautious around police. I'm always cautious around financial institutions. I'm always cautious with education systems. You know, I have to fight for the extras for my sons, and he's in a great school, but I have to fight for tutoring because his math skills coming from a public school system wasn't the same as his counterparts at this predominantly white institution.
But
And I had to fight.
School, right? He's in a really good school.
Oh, he's in the best independent high school in almost the state of California. But, you know, it's a diversity thing for them. It looks good on paper to have him there, and I'm willing to support that because it gives him the education that he needs. But I shouldn't have to, and that's what we're really trying to get through. Is I shouldn't have to do these things, jump through these hoops, or make myself stand out more just to be counted the same. And unfortunately, the distractions are coming up. You know, basketball's coming back, baseball's coming back, football's going to come back. So now everybody's going to be like, oh, I have all these other things to do, and I'm not going to be captivated by all the other stuff that's going on around Black Lives Matter and racial injustices. And I think the change is going to come in November, when we have to get the current resident of Pennsylvania Avenue up out of there and start working ground level to get to the higher level. We always want to start in the White House, but we have to start locally and changing our policies locally, changing our policies in our counties, and then changing on state level, and then it'll move federally. But we always want to start federally when the federal doesn't hit us as much as the local hits us first. And so hopefully, as people learn political influences, as they learn, you know, financial literacy, as they learn about education and how that all transforms your entire life. And I'm looking to all of these, you know, Tori and Reshonda and my children, that what I'm suffering now, they don't have to suffer as much. And that's where the change is going to come in that next generation below me. Because Reshonda's 20 years, and I think Tori's 20 years younger than I am. That's 2 generations removed from me. My children are right behind them. That's where the change is going to be effective, is within their generation. And I don't know if we'll see anything big happen right now, but we're definitely going to see something big in their generation.
Right. Good points. Rebecca, do you want to add something?
Yeah, and Joy made such good points. I think it's well known that communities of color are being hit the hardest by COVID-19. And what I'm afraid of is kind of the sensational aspect of people's attention spans. And so becoming desensitized to it and putting it on the back burner as other distractions come back, as you were describing, you know, sports come back and all of these other, you know, exciting entertainment things. And I do see the underlying issue as systems, what Joy was just talking about, and the systemic racism aspect of it. I'm really glad that you pointed out local policies as being, you know, one of blocks as starting points. I do think that this movement will have a long-term positive impact on closing a little bit the financial gap between communities of color and historically white populations. I think that in the near term, the short-term losses for communities of color are going to be devastating, to the point where it's going to take a very long time for them to earn back, capitalizing on any progress that we make with the systems. And because I think that we're only going to be able to change a couple systems at a time. And that's even being depending on what happens in November too, it might be even longer than that. But I do think long term, there will be positive ramifications for this, which is why it's so important that people participate and, make their voices heard, because it will make a difference, and it might be hard to see it in the near term.
Yeah, these things always take so much time, but you got to do it anyway. You got to start and keep going. Reshonda, did you get a chance to say anything on this topic yet?
No, but my colleagues have definitely done a great job. I think what I want to add in though is we talk about systemic racism, and I think what people have to realize is this isn't just a Black issue. It's not just an Indigenous issue. It's not just a people of color issue. This is an all of us concept and thing that we have to get behind and support, because our systems are failing communities of color. We know that, but what we also have to acknowledge is that they're actually failing all of us, right? Because we have low income people, we have people across the board who are falling through the cracks. And so what I want us to remember is when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, yes, we're talking about the needs of a particular group that will benefit the masses. And I think that that's the important focus to be on. And I'll even go ahead and say, during the 60s, and when we had the beginning of the civil rights movement, that also opened the door for the beginning of the Chicana rights movement, for the beginning of the LGBTQ movement. And so just acknowledging the solidarity that comes into this when we begin to address these systemic problems, we see the intersectionality that's involved with it, and that it's not just one identity that we're carrying. We carry multiple identities, and when we begin to address that, we all benefit. I also just, again, thank you, Rebecca, for acknowledging that what's going on in communities of color right now with COVID. And I think it's also important to note that there's so much community organizing going on, especially in the Bay Area in particular. Not being from the Bay Area, I can say people from Oakland, I love the energy and spirit. I'm right with there. We're fighters for what's right. And so really acknowledging right now as we're talking about what's happening in schools, proud to see so many schools taking police out of them, disrupting that school to prison pipeline, and really supporting our children. Because as you all said, it's my generation, it's the generation coming, it's these amazing, passionate Gen Zs who are calling out racism and sexism and all of those things that are happening in our world. And it really just comes back to that point, this is an us issue. We are all interconnected. And when we do right by one group of people, we do right by all groups of people. And it's really remembering that piece. So that's what I'll say. I'm optimistic. I think we have to, remember that policy changes also come with this. So I am an advocate for local government, holding your city council responsible, holding your school boards responsible. Those things matter. Those things affect policy and change, and really starting there. And just shout out to all the amazing organizations that are doing work right now to support and advocate for our youth, our children, their education, and also for them to use their voice, because it can be really scary right now to stand up and be afraid you might lose a scholarship for college if you're speaking up against Black Lives Matter. So these are really real things that we have to acknowledge in the realm. And there's so much more I could say on this topic, but I think that really encompasses where we're at.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. To the audience, was I right about these women? I am so energized listening to you all. I can't even tell you. Thank you so much. We're going to have to end the podcast, unfortunately, but it has been a pleasure. And thank you.